I remember that afternoon so clearly, as if the sunlight itself wanted to record every detail. I had just set a kettle on the stove when I heard the knock, gentle, almost hesitant. When I opened the door, there stood Daniel, my neighbor's son. Not a boy at all, despite how often people still used the word son as if it meant youth. He was in his early 30s, tall, composed, and carrying that quiet seriousness he must have learned from his mother. He smiled, but something in it trembled. "Miss Harper, do you have a moment?" he asked. I invited him in, wiping my hands on a towel, trying to pretend I didn't notice how unsettled he looked. Daniel had always been respectful, kind, the type who offered to carry groceries without needing to be asked. But that day his eyes held a weight I'd never seen on him before. He sat at my kitchen table, glancing around like he wasn't sure if he should speak. "I'm sorry to bother you," he began. "Mom said you've been good with, well, talking things through." I lowered the kettle to the stove's back burner. "Daniel, whatever it is, you can talk to me." For a moment he just breathed, slow, deliberate, like he was steadying himself. Then he told me that work had been overwhelming, that he'd been feeling pressure he couldn't quite explain, that he didn't know who else he could trust to talk to without feeling judged. His voice was calm, but there was something raw beneath it. Not weakness, humanness. And it struck me how rarely we see that in others, especially in people who try so hard to appear strong. I leaned forward, folding my hands. "You don't have to carry everything alone," I said softly. "No one does." He looked at me, then really looked, and the room grew strangely still. Not uncomfortable, just unexpectedly honest. Like the air between us shifted into something warm, something understanding. It was the first moment I realized how long it had been since someone looked at me that way, with sincerity instead of routine politeness. The kettle began to whistle, breaking the silence. I poured us both tea, and as the steam rose, he relaxed, his shoulders easing. We talked about work, his mother, the way life sneaks up on you when you're not paying attention. What surprised me most wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. He spoke with a careful gentleness, the kind people use when they're afraid of losing something important. As he talked, I noticed the small details. How he wrapped his hands around the warm mug, how he exhaled when he finally felt understood, how his eyes softened when he realized he wasn't being judged. And maybe it was the quiet of my kitchen, or the way the sunlight filtered through the curtains, or just two people finally being honest with themselves, but the moment lingered. Not inappropriate, not romantic, just deeply human. Yet somehow I sensed that this was only the beginning, that what happened next would stay with me far longer than either of us expected. The next morning, I tried to brush off the lingering warmth of our conversation, telling myself I was reading too much into it. People confide in neighbors all the time, especially when they've known each other for years. But as I stood at the window sipping my coffee, I saw Daniel walking down his driveway, shoulders straighter than the day before, and something inside me tightened in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside to water the potted plants by my porch. The sun was bright, the kind of golden warmth that makes even the quietest neighborhood feel alive. I heard footsteps behind me, and when I turned, there he was, hands in his pockets, hair a little tousled, eyes calm but purposeful. "Miss Harper," he said, smiling a little. "I hope I'm not interrupting." I laughed softly. "You know you can call me Laura. And no, you're not interrupting at all." He nodded, stepping closer, his voice low enough that it felt like the world around us dimmed just a little. "I just wanted to thank you for yesterday. I didn't realize how much I needed to talk until I finally did." I looked at him, really seeing him in the bright afternoon light. He wasn't the uncertain man from yesterday. He looked more grounded, like he'd found some kind of balance. "I'm glad you came by," I said. "You carry a lot on your shoulders." Sometimes saying things out loud is the first way to lighten that load. He glanced at the flowers, then back at me. Can I help? I hesitated for only a second before handing him the small watering can. His fingers brushed mine, not intentionally, not lingering, but enough to send a subtle awareness through me. It wasn't something inappropriate, just human connection. A reminder that touch, even accidental, could still be felt deeply. As we watered the plants, he asked me about my work, my quiet routines, the things I enjoyed when the house fell silent in the evenings. It surprised me how easy it was to open up to him. I didn't usually talk about myself, especially not with someone his age. But Daniel had a way of listening without interrupting, without waiting to speak. He listened because he wanted to understand. When we finished, we sat on the porch steps. A soft breeze rustled the trees, and somewhere down the street, a lawnmower hummed. Everyday sounds, but somehow the moment felt different. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Yesterday, when you said no one has to carry everything alone, I haven't been able to stop thinking about that. It's true, I said gently. People think being strong means being silent, but sometimes it's the opposite. He looked at me, his expression open, almost vulnerable, but in a way that felt safe, not fragile. I didn't expect you to understand me so quickly. I smiled. I didn't expect you to let me. We sat there a moment, not speaking, but feeling something shift, quietly, subtly, like the beginning of a tide turning. Not an attraction we couldn't justify, but an understanding that life can surprise you with connections you didn't see coming. Finally, he stood, brushing off his jeans. Would it be all right if I came by again sometime? Just to talk. My answer came before I could second-guess it. Yes, Daniel, I'd like that. As he walked back to his house, a gentle warmth settled in me. Not excitement, not anticipation, just a sense of being seen and seeing someone in return. I didn't know then how quickly those simple conversations would deepen, or how much they would change the way I saw myself. I hadn't expected Daniel to return so soon, but 2 days later, just as the sun began to dip behind the rooftops, there was another gentle knock on my door. I opened it to find him standing there with 2 mugs in his hands, steam curling into the cool evening air. I made too much tea, he said with an almost sheepish smile. Thought you might like some. I stepped aside to let him in, feeling an unexpected flutter. Simple, harmless, but undeniably there. My house felt different with him in it, as if the walls softened, the rooms listened. We settled in the living room, the soft glow of a lamp warming the space. He handed me one of the mugs and sat across from me, leaning back but not relaxed. He held something inside him, something he was trying to decide whether to share. For a while we just talked, about his work, about my small rituals, about the quiet ways ordinary days unfold. It was unhurried, like we had all the time in the world. But eventually, his words flowed, his gaze shifted downward, and he took a long breath. There's something else, he said, something I didn't tell you the other day. I set my mug down gently. You can tell me if you want to. He nodded, hands clasping loosely together. I've been struggling with feeling like I'm living a life I didn't choose. Expectations, responsibilities, trying to be the version of myself everyone thinks I am. And then I realized one day I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. I listened without interrupting. His voice wasn't shaking, but it carried a quiet urgency, as if speaking these thoughts aloud was both a relief and a risk. When I talked to you, he continued, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to pretend. You just listened. You didn't try to fix me or judge me. You just saw me. Something in that admission settled deep in my chest. Not flattery. Something more meaningful. A reminder of how powerful it can be simply to witness someone. I leaned forward, resting my hands on my knees. Daniel, people spend years searching for a space where they can just be themselves. It's human to want that. It's not weakness." He lifted his eyes to mine, and the room felt impossibly still. The connection between us wasn't romantic. It was something quieter and deeper, recognition. Two people at very different points in life, yet somehow meeting in the same emotional place. He exhaled, shoulders loosening. "I don't know why it's easier with you." I smiled softly. "Maybe because you never gave yourself permission before." He looked down again, shaking his head slightly, almost laughing at himself. "You make things sound so simple." "Not simple," I said. "Clear." For a moment neither of us spoke. Outside, the evening breeze brushed against the windows, and distant streetlights flickered to life. He set his mug aside, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, mirroring me. "There's something else I've been feeling," he said quietly, "and I don't know what to do with it." I didn't push. I didn't lean in. I just waited, giving him room to choose his words. "It's comfort," he said finally. "When I'm here, when I talk to you, it feels like I'm learning something about myself that I didn't know how to name." His honesty was warm, not heavy. Safe, not dangerous. I felt it too, that steady awareness that something important was forming between us. Something grounded in trust, not impulse. "Then let it be what it is," I said gently. "No expectations. No labels. Just two people who understand each other." He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw gratitude, relief, and something else, respect. Deep, unmistakable respect. He stood after a moment slowly, as if he didn't want to break the atmosphere of the room. "I should go," he said quietly. "But I'll come back, if that's all right." "It's all right," I replied. When the door closed behind him, I sat for a long time in the silence he left behind. Not lonely, never lonely, just thoughtful, aware, changed in a way I hadn't expected. I didn't know what the next step would look like, but I sensed that the moment was coming when we would both have to face what this connection meant for each of us. The next week moved slowly, each day carrying a quiet sense of anticipation. Daniel didn't visit right away, and I told myself it was for the best. He needed space to understand what he was feeling, and I needed space to understand what I was becoming to him. But one evening, just before dusk, I found him standing on my porch again, hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders drawn slightly inward, like he'd been standing there for a few minutes working up the courage to knock. I opened the door before he did. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I answered, stepping aside to let him slip into the gentle warmth of my home. We didn't go to the kitchen or the porch or the living room. We simply stood in the entryway for a moment, as if we both sensed that this conversation was going to be different. He took a breath. "I've been thinking a lot, probably too much." "I imagine you have," I said with a small smile. He didn't smile back, not because he was upset, but because he was focused, steady. "I keep trying to understand why talking to you means so much to me, why it feels like I'm finally being honest with myself. And the truth is, it scares me a little." I stepped closer, not touching him, just closing the space enough so that he knew he wasn't standing alone in whatever he was feeling. "New things always do," I said, "especially when they shift how we see ourselves." He nodded, his gaze searching mine. "I don't want to misunderstand this connection, or make it into something it's not." "That's good," I said gently. "It means you respect it." He exhaled, a long, slow release of tension. "I do. Maybe more than I know how to explain." We moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, but angled toward each other, as if drawn by some quiet pull. The lamp cast a soft glow, and the evening settled around us like a blanket. "I've realized something," he said after a moment. "Talking to you, it's helped me understand myself. Not because you tell me what to do, but because you help me hear my own thoughts more clearly." "That's all I ever wanted," I replied. for you to find your own voice. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Gratitude, admiration, and something that felt like gentle revelation. You've changed me, Laura. Or maybe you helped me see the part of me that was already trying to grow. My chest tightened, not with fear or confusion, but with something tender and deeply human. And you've reminded me that connection isn't limited by age or circumstance. Sometimes it just arrives. He nodded slowly. Exactly. A long, quiet moment passed between us. Not charged, not uncertain, just present, fully present. Then he said, I know I need to take the next steps in my life on my own, but I want you to know that you were the one who helped me realize I can. You didn't fix me. You didn't try to. You just listened. And that meant more than you know. I felt a warmth rise behind my eyes, not sadness, but the kind of full-hearted emotion that comes from witnessing something meaningful unfold right in front of you. I'm glad I could be here for you, I said. You deserve to find your direction. He stood then slowly, as if grounding himself before moving forward. When he reached the door, he turned back. I'm going to be all right, he said, a small, steady smile on his face. And you helped me believe that. I know you will, I replied. He hesitated, then added, I'll still come by. Maybe not every day, but I don't want this connection to fade. It won't, I promised. He stepped outside, the cool evening light softening his silhouette. Before walking away, he looked back one more time, a quiet thank you in his eyes that said everything words couldn't. When I closed the door, I leaned against it, letting the silence settle around me like a gentle tide. I didn't feel lonely. I felt complete, changed, aware that life still had the ability to surprise me in ways I'd long stopped expecting. His words stayed with me, not as a burden, not as a question, but as a reminder that connection, real, respectful, deeply human connection, can arrive when you least expect it and leave you better than it found you. And sometimes that is more than enough.